Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's uLaw webinar. Now, today's webinar is not accredited for CPD credits. Again, wanting to make sure that you're aware. Today's session is really going to highlight and talk about how do you migrate your data, especially if you're getting started with uLawPractice. How do you migrate your data over from, let's say, a previous system, a product, or a manual system that you had, and migrate all of that important data into uLaw. We'll also look at how you okay. Again, for those who are just getting started, I want to make sure that you're able to see my screen. I welcome you to today's webinar. Again, as I was saying, today's session, again, is not accredited for any CPD credits, but it's going to specifically highlight about how you can migrate your practice from a previous system of record, whether that's an automated system or whether that's a manual system. How do you bring the data in? How do you set up some of the key accounts that are important for you to continue using the uLaw product? So we're fundamentally going to cover the building blocks, if you will, of the uLaw practice, highlight the important data components, the important aspects of it. How do you maximize the use of our settings, which is very critical to how you set your account within the product. We'll also talk about how you can set up your bank accounts, the placeholder bank accounts within uLaw, and walk you through how you can bring your balances in and to the point where you can start to use the product in its full-fledged form of intaking clients, creating matters, etc., up to reconciliation. Okay? Once again, for friends and colleagues who have joined us, today's session is going to be about how do you get started with the uLaw practice. Very important for those who are just getting started with the product, for others who are looking to get a better, I would say, visualization of the important building blocks of the product as well. Okay? Like every other uLaw webinar, today's webinar has a specific agenda. It's going to talk about how do I get started in terms of using the product, maximizing the use of either your trial or if you have someone who's recently purchased it, how do I go about getting started with utilizing it on a day-to-day basis? What are the important building blocks, the material that I should prepare so that I can bring data over from a previous system? Now, of course, if you're a brand new practitioner, you don't have data from any previous systems, and if you're just getting started, then of course you don't have to worry about any specific data migration. As and when you intake new clients in your practice, you can start to input that information right away into the uLaw product. Okay? We'll talk about important contacts, especially about client intake. How do we go about creating specific matters for those clients? And how do you handle any outstanding balances that you may have with regards to your trust account, your general accounts? You may have more than one account, general accounts. So as we're also talking about how do I manage those accounts, any accounts receivable, HST accounts, etc. And finally, if you are a firm that's been using uLaw for a while and now you're looking to explore to expand its use as your firm continues to grow by providing access to new accounts or new user logins within your firm for your assistant or other additional co-workers, we'll talk about how you can set permission models of expanding the use of the uLaw product within your extended enterprise. Okay? All right. Now I'm going to get started with sharing an image file. As part of your onboarding welcome package, you should receive a simple image file such as this that a lot of our clients print out and pretty much pin on their desktop. Essentially, it is a step-by-step process right from setting up your password all the way to reconciling your accounts and generating your trust balances and your general balances, right? So we've kind of taken this through a simple roadmap of about 16 different steps, if you will. We've really broken it down step by step as to things that you would have to do, and we've given it simple headings so you know the context of what those steps are meant to accomplish. So I'm going to try and see if I can bring up a slightly bigger version of that image. It's simpler. Okay. So hopefully this helps. I'm going to try and share the screen with you. So as you can see, step one, right from setting up the password. I'm going to take a couple of minutes after I've demonstrated this or walked you through this visualization. We're, of course, going to take you through a demonstration of the product as to how you can accomplish these or many of these steps. Okay? So setting up the password is one of the most important aspects of the product because we want to safeguard your data. We are, of course, a cloud-based system. We do provide 256-bit encryption. We do provide two-factor authentication. But beyond those security aspects, we also protect your data by providing a very strong password combination that we provide restrictions on. Okay? So when you get your new account with uLaw, you're going to be provided a default password. And now you can change that password right under settings. And maybe we're going to be doing this. Let's just jump back. So I've set up a brand new account where you can see right under settings, you have the opportunity to change password. You provide your default password and any new password. So you can just go ahead and say, so it would not suffice if you just provided alphabets and numbers. You can see it's going to say it's a pretty weak password. You're not even going to be able to change it. So a really good password in uLaw would include alphabets, numbers, special characters, make it really strong. Okay? So this is really your first step into utilizing the product, is to change and set up your own personalized password. Once you've done that in the settings, what we recommend is start to explore the use of the settings to try and personalize this experience specifically to your firm. Okay, so this is where you're going to start to enter some common information that you don't have to repeat yourself, because uLaw is going to help you embed all of that data as you progress through creating clients and matters. Okay? So one of the most important pieces of information that we believe that's very personal to your firm is, of course, your billable hour rate. Now, whether you charge by billable or whether you charge flat rate, we're hoping that some combination, there is a minimum billable hour that you would charge. And apart from the billable rate, this is a placeholder opportunity for you to also provide some default costing for all of your disbursements. So if you're going to charge your client, let's say for postage, for mileage, for fax, etc., we also give you the opportunity to save all that default information so that you don't have to repeat yourself when you're actually dispersing the client. Okay? So going back to the uLaw product, under settings, we have this tab called taxes and rates. This is pretty much where you're going to set up your default costs. So the default fee rate, that is your per hour cost. And then we start, of course, when we set you up and when you set the account up, based on your 30-day trial registration, we capture the jurisdiction that you're in from, and we set you up for the taxes, as you can see. And further down, if you look at that, you start to see all of the disbursements, the default cost of the disbursements, overdue penalty rate, if there's any, your mileage, and you can adjust this. We just start you off with some basics. You can change this based on standards and what your firm would offer your clients. Okay, so you could charge your assistant travel rate, any fax rate, any photocopies, bank draft rate. And we're going to cover this a bit later, but this is the opportunity if you do use uLaw for an extended enterprise. So if you're going to have coworkers and assistants that you're going to start collaborating with, you can also decide what their fee structure should look like, okay, if you like to. You can set what those rates are. You can say what your default assistant, the second assistant, third, fourth, fifth, etc. Okay, and this is your default per hour rate. And it's important that you hit the save, because this is in the cloud. We want to make sure that anytime you make a change to the information, that you're able to hit the save button. Now you can also add your HST number right here, if you have one. Makes it easier for us to fill out some forms that do ask for that information. Okay, so first was this password, and then we move on to setting up taxes and rates. And you can now start to add your license information for any of the court forms. So again, going back to the forms, you have your legal license number. Okay, I'm just going to come up with a random number. You can provide that as well. In important court forms, wherever that information is required, we would include it as well. Now, another place where we do include the tax number is your invoice. Okay, so the HST number, when you're charging your clients your HST in the province of Ontario or any jurisdictional tax in other provinces, of course, these rates would change based on that, as well as the number, of course, would be based on your jurisdiction. That would show up in the invoice itself. Okay? Very basic setup, right? And now you can start to think about some other aspects of it as well. For example, we know what your basic information is once you've provided that during your 30-day trial registration. So we take that information. We take the Thomas Edison that you provided at the time and we auto-populate it. If for whatever reason you want to change this, or let's say the phone number has changed, make sure that you include that right here. You can add multiple pieces of information. And this is particular to your firm's information. So this is your ABC Legal Services as an example, and this is what you can use. You could switch this between work, and this could be home. Okay, so really personalize the information. Keep in mind, very important, the name, the company name, and the address, along with phone or any fax number or any combination. You have the opportunity to put all of that information in across all correspondences, whether that's an envelope, whether that's invoices, you can do that. Okay. Now, in terms of personalizing and setting up your account, this is one of the important aspects. The next important aspect would be getting into the Matter tab. Okay, so the Matter tab corresponds to the kind of information that you're going to be entering within your Matter tab, where you start to create a file and provide all the information for this file. This is where you're going to be doing dockets, disbursements, you're going to be accepting retainers, and this is where you're also going to be generating invoices as well. So you, as a legal practitioner now, can totally personalize the default information that needs to get into this user interface. Okay, so for a quick example, you can decide whether your default time format should be 12 hours or 24 hours. You can decide whether your default time as you dock it should be rounded to the next 6 minutes, which is always a good practice, whether it should remain at the current time, okay, etc. Very important aspect is uLaw provides you the opportunity to generate pre-builds or previews of your invoices prior to you generating an actual invoice. So the preview is, of course, a harmless document. It does not generate any invoices, neither does it generate any ledgers, but it's just a visual representation of what a typical invoice may look like in that instance for you to review before you send it to your client. Now, when you do generate that preview, we believe it's just easier for you to recognize it if we have a watermark which says preview, so that you don't accidentally even send it to your client. But you can determine whether you want to say yes or no, to whether you want to see that preview or not. Another important aspect of the uLaw product is every time you actually generate an invoice, we do have the capability to send you a quick summary of that invoice itself. So when you noticed in your details section, there's a work email that we ask for. Now this is the email to which basic information gets sent out anytime you generate an invoice. Information such as the invoice number, the day that it was generated, the amount of the invoice, including any HSTs that were involved, etc. Now if this included, let's say, a trust transfer, we also give you pertinent information about the trust transfer that you can do, the eligible trust transfer of money that you can do from the trust account into your general account as well. Okay. Now, as much as you may think that these are, default setups, we've often found that customers who have maximized utilizing these settings have truly done well to set their uLaw account for success. It's a more or less a one-time setup because many of these are defaults. You can always change them during the course of generating an invoice or anything like that. But if you want to set yourself up for success, set up those defaults, this is the best place to spend that initial time to do it. You can set up yourself for eco-friendly invoices, and this is an important aspect. Now, by default, we set you up to be a billable time formatting legal firm. Okay? Now you can change this. If you're a legal firm that predominantly does flat rate billing, you can set this option to flat rate. And then every time you dock it, that's the default option that you're going to be shown. Okay? So if I set this to flat rate, you're going to see that every time I dock it, it's going to start off with a flat rate docket rather than a billable time docket. Okay, so that's what the difference is. And would you like to hide the summary in an invoice? A summary is so a typical uLaw invoice consists of the history of the entire life cycle of that invoice, previous information that makes it complete, makes it easier for your customer to appreciate the life cycle of all the other invoices and previous payments that were done. But if you don't want those summaries to be shown in every invoice that you generate, this is where you can decide whether you want to show this or not. Again, when you generate invoices, we do give you a few options. We're, of course, looking to expand these options. These are themes that we incorporate that makes the visualization of the invoice template a lot more appealing. Now, each firm has their own liking towards different themes. By default, any of the default to the Xmas theme incorporates your own banner logos. Anything from the uLaw theme and below incorporates a color combination of a standard uLaw theme template that we have. Okay, so you can determine which one is best for your firm. You can set those default themes right under settings as well. The same thing applies for receipts. When you generate whether it's a retainer receipt or it's a payment receipt, you can set those defaults. Now, if you only want your company name to be shown on an invoice, so if you just want ABC Legal Services along with its address to be shown, you can set this to yes. But if you want Thomas Edison along with ABC Legal Services and the address to be shown, you can leave the default as it is. Okay. Any special instructions, terms, any invoice instructions gets automatically populated at the bottom of every invoice page. If you want to integrate with any third-party cloud storage systems, this is where you're going to do it. You can tell us that you want to integrate with Google Drive, and we would ask you, of course, for your Google username password one time to set that up. Okay? So very important, and we're here as a support to help you through this process, but I wanted to take the time to kind of highlight how important these settings are as you get started using the uLaw product and how important it becomes as you continue this path of maximizing the use of the product. Okay, so we started with changing the password, to setting up the basic taxes and rates for your firm, and then now we've moved to further personalizing the billable time, the flat rate options that you have, the different templates that you can use for invoices, and the various little nuances that can help make this uLaw product generate the type of document that's more in tune with your firm's needs. Okay? All right, so let's move along. So let's say you've done all of that information. You've done the basic settings within uLaw. The next important aspect that we ask for is to find a way to open up all of your bank accounts that you've created in real life. So before you purchase the uLaw product, or maybe even in parallel, of course, it's important for you to consider working with the right financial institution. So hopefully you've done your homework to go talk to different banks or colleagues in the industry to figure out which bank is more friendly towards legal practitioners, gives you more options, whatever is important for you and your firm. And once you do sign up with this financial institution, you're again going to determine, based on the style of your firm, whether you're going to need a trust account or if you're just going to open up a general account. Okay? Typically, you may have a trust account, a general account, and some firms even start off with a business credit card. Okay, so assuming you have a single trust account and multiple general accounts, let's assume you have a business general account as well as a credit card. That's what you're going to start with any of the financial institutions that we come to know in Canada, for example, TD, RBC, Scotiabank, or it could be any of the other cooperative banks, credit unions, etc. Right? Now it's important that you mimic that information of all that banking information that you have in real life, and you mimic that or bring that as a placeholder into uLaw so that we can appreciate which accounts are being used across the actual transactions that happen in real life. Because uLaw is looking to be your bookkeeping software. It's not just a practice management software. It's also a legal accounting and a business accounting software. So it's going to help you with both your Law Society compliance for all of the ledgers and journals and the reconciliation statements that you have to do, but it's also going to help you with your CRA's regulations and compliance with regards to, balances and trust, revenue, expense, profit and loss, trial balance, and also filing your taxes both for your corporate tax as well as your HST or jurisdictional taxes, right? So it's important for us to know which bank accounts were involved in, let's say, a transaction that happened either for your own corporation or with regards to a client. So let's focus on this particular aspect of getting started with uLaw. So once you've done all the settings, let's go ahead and make those basic changes. Now let's move on to the next section, which is setting up those placeholder bank accounts in uLaw. Please keep in mind, this does not mean that we're actually connecting with your bank. We do not intend to connect with your bank, but we are looking to create placeholders that can actually tell us which bank accounts are actually being used. So in uLaw, you jump into the Accounts section, and if you click on Chart of Accounts, so you have Chart of Accounts, and this is where we set you up with some basic information. We hope that you have a trust account. Well, if you do not have a trust account, then you do not have to even worry about it because you're never going to use the trust account for any of the transactions that occurs in real life. So this is it only holds good if a trust account exists in real life as well. So let's assume you do have a trust account, okay? And then what you have to do under Assets, click on this Pooled Trust Account. Now by default, we give you, based on your information that you provided at the time of registration, we just pretty much copy that into the nickname. But you, of course, have the opportunity to change this to whatever you like. You could say this is ABC Legal Services, TD Trust Account. Or you can just say TD Canada Trust Account, TD Canada. Or it could be RBC, BMO, whatever, right? So that it's easier for you to recognize which account this is. Sometimes some law firms may have multiple trust accounts as well. One for your transactional pool trust account, then you have another one for real estate purposes, right? So you can use this to define and provide a nickname so that it's easier for you to recognize while transacting. Now the same thing applies to setting up the general accounts. So you again click on Chart of Accounts, which is really the universal term for all the accounts that you may have, Assets, and instead of Trust, you're going to look at the bank accounts. Again, by default, uLaw sets you up with 2 accounts, giving you a placeholder for a 3rd account. You do not have to use it. You can even ignore the bank account 3 if there's only 1 or 2 accounts. So we'll start with the general account. So if I click on General, you can see we give you a title. You can provide whatever information you want. You can say General, RBC. Now we even have clients who do this. They say RBC, and after a little hyphen, you can even put the account number information. And what uLaw can do for you is if you do provide this template or this type of naming convention, if you will, we're also able to populate your Form 9As with this particular information. We just take any information after this hyphen and we auto-populate Form 9As where they do ask you for the account number. You can either do that or you can fill out that Form 9A manually every time you generate one. Okay, it's totally left to you. So there's 2, I would say, benefits of figuring out a name and convention that's meaningful for you. All right, so let's do the last thing. If you do have a business credit card, you can define what that is. You can say RBC, Visa, or MasterCard, or whatever, okay? You can even change the title if you like. So this is how you can fundamentally set up the real-life bank accounts both on your trust and your general and provide really the information as placeholders within uLaw. Okay? For example, if you do have a HST account, you can just rename the bank account 3 and just call it a HST account if you like, because some firms may actually have a separate HST account where they transfer over all the HST that they received so that they basically use that to pay off their HST as well, if you like. Okay, so that's the trust bank. And of course, you have your cash account with your owner's pocket. This is an important account that we use every time you utilize any of your own money on behalf of the business. Okay? So going back to our steps of onboarding or getting started with uLaw, we've done the password, taxes and rates, any license information, and we've done the settings with regards to matters and any additional users that may be part of your firm. And now we've set up basic bank account information. Okay. Now time comes to create information for your clients. And this is where I want to draw your attention. uLaw provides, right under your help, tutorials, how-to tutorials. And if you click on that, it pretty much gives you the 5 easy steps of onboarding uLaw. Okay, so it gives you 5 easy steps, and that many of this is probably being repeated in today's webinar, but this is something I would draw your attention to, especially if you're looking to get started. So setting up your uLaw practice, everything that we went through so far, setting up your general accounts that I did right now, and next comes the important aspects of reconciling your trust accounts, your general accounts, and finally AR balances, which may include HST as well. Okay, so let's get started with really recognizing your trust accounts. Okay, assuming you're a firm that is coming in or looking to migrate into uLaw with some active client from a previous system. So let's say the first part of this 2019, you were using a Excel sheet or maybe a third-party system, and that's where you maintained all of your client information, and you have, trust balances based on the transactions that have happened, till date. And let's assume you're going to onboard into uLaw 1st of May. Now, typically, of course, we have in-house bookkeepers, part of our support team, who can help you with the migration onboarding. We have tools that can help you with that as well, as much as possible. Traditionally, we take a completion of a quarter to bring all of the balances in, a very opportunistic time. Another opportunistic time, of course, is the end of the year. But many times, it's the end of a logical closure of a quarter. But what we ask you for is creating an Excel sheet with basically this information in it. So 3 tabs having a trust balance in the order, a general balance, and an AR balance. So regardless of what system you're using, we're hoping that you have this information, which is just the client name, the last date of the transaction. So when was the last day of transacting with that matter? Mostly an invoice that was generated, and with a trust balance. So again, at a basic level, that's all the information we ask for to bring that information into uLaw. Okay? So when you're first getting started with uLaw, if I were to go in and let's say generate your balances and do your trust balance report or statement as of today, and this is for someone who's just getting started new with uLaw, right? You can see that this is a fresh start. There's no balances, there's nothing. It's $0. So what's important is for us to now start to enter the right information so that we can start to mimic this total trust balance of $750. Okay, so let's start with creating the client, entering the trust balance for that matter, for of course the client and for the matter, and adding the trust balance. So the first step is creating the client. So let me go ahead and say add new contact. I'm going to add it to my clients. I'm going to say this is Mr. John Duss. I'm not going to add any additional information. I'm just going to go straight into save and matter for purposes of today's demo. But keep in mind, of course, you can add as many information as you like about that contact. So I'm going to say this is a small claims court. I'm going to say this is a John versus Derek. Could be anything, or it could just be John slip and fall. Okay, so the first step is to create the client and create a file or a matter. Now right away what you can do is, because there's a trust balance, which means there's money in the trust account, you can go into trust and say deposit into trust, and you can say other payment deposit into trust. And let's assume the last transaction date was the 1st of May. You can basically change that date, 1st of May, add the outstanding balance, and then say of trust balance from previous system. And when you look at accounts, this is where it becomes important. So this is the placeholder labels that you had provided earlier on when we were setting up those accounts. That should give you the information you need to ensure that you're using the right accounts to deal with. Okay, and then you basically hit okay. You can put the date in if you don't have that. Now if I go into my accounts and I generate, let's say, a balance, and I do a trust balance as of today's date, you see it's not a zero balance report anymore. That has the $350 for Mr. John Duss, just like how it is in your previous system as you bring it in. Okay? Let's just complete this for Ryan Peter so that we have this whole number of 750. But I hope you've been able to get that point. Let's redo this for Ryan Peter. Quickly, I'll go back into my contacts. I'm going to add a new contact into my clients group. I'm going to say this is Mr. Ryan Peter. I'm going to hit Save and Matter. And maybe this is a POA matter. And I'm going to go ahead and say Speeding on Young. And hit Save. And for the most important aspect, when was the last day and what was the amount of the balance? We're going to the Trust tab, Deposit, the Payment Deposit and Trust. We're going to hit the 400 for the 15th. Migrating trust balance from previous system into the trust account, of course, and I'm going to hit Apply. Now, if we go back to our accounts and regenerate that one last time, and I'm going to do the trust balances. Now you notice that that 750 is the balance. Very important fundamental starting point for us to know where you left off in your previous system and what information we need to start your journey of your legal practice in uLaw, right? So even if you go into the uLaw account and if you go into your trust account, you're going to see those two transactions that adds up to today's balance. Okay? All right. So that's one of the most fundamental steps as to how you would start to bring your trust balances into the product. Creating a client, creating a matter, and a deposit into the trust account with the last transaction date and the amount of the balance left. Now you can continue down that path for all of the active clients that you have. Now if you have a lot of such clients, there's two ways of doing it. One, we have an import tool right within contacts to begin with. So under contacts, we have this opportunity for you to now import all your contacts into uLaw in a single snapshot. We give you, a template that you could use, such as this, where you can export and import right from an Excel sheet or a comma-separated value file, which I'll show you in a minute. Okay? So you are able to import. You can choose that particular CSV file, and you can basically just submit and import all that information. Now, once you've done the trust balances, as I mentioned, you can then look into what are the, if any, what are the balances in the different general accounts that your business has. Okay? So maybe make a simple list of the outstanding general balances. Keep in mind, you have all of this as help videos right under your uLaw help. So by all means, you can use that as a quick reference point. But again, trying to explain these balances is really as of the date that you're bringing data into uLaw, or you want to get started using uLaw. Of course, we need to know your history, and we just want to understand what those balances are. So ABC Legal Services, as a general account, let's say you have $500, you have about $200 in credit card payments that you owe, and you have $10, giving you a total of $310. So let's say that's the situation. You could bring that in a single snapshot. By doing either a capital injection, and we prefer this, and you can see this in our video itself. Let me quickly search up the capital. Just call it general balances. You can say that there's a $300 in your general account. There's $10 in your HST account, at least as per this situation here. Let's see how capital, and you did have that credit card, so let's look at the credit card. I'm going to make, say, 210. That was 200 maybe. And balancing the remaining into the capital firm. Okay, so you basically enter your balances, and that's how you bring in all of your outstanding balances that you may have. So this is exactly the video under the help file, under tutorials, and this is video number 4, I believe. Okay, performing the general reconciliation. And this is equally important for us to do it only because we need to know what the starting point of your general balances are. Now, the last particular video that is of interest is bringing all of your AR balances. And what are the AR balances? Now, these are the outstanding any accounts receivable that the client owes you. Okay, one is to have a trust balance. The other is to actually have an AR balance, or which is really the accounts receivable, if you will. And once again, we recommend having a separate tab for those accounts receivables by really listing down who owes you what money, in what form, as of what date. Right? So whether it's a automated system or if it's a previously used manual system, we're hoping that you have generated even a Word document as an invoice for the services you've rendered. So maybe, let's assume for this client, Fred Couples, right? For a matter for Fred versus Jill, you generated an invoice on the 12th of May of 2019 for $339, out of which $300 was, let's assume, a flat rate, and the $39 was the HST that you hope to receive from the client. Okay? Now, if you've done this prior to bringing over that data into uLaw, of course, we would need to know what that AR balance looks like. And this is how you would go about doing it in uLaw. Okay? So first, let's go ahead and create that client Fred Couples and create a file, Fred versus Jill, and let's look at how you can bring that in. Okay? First step, I'll go ahead and I'll say, into my client, Mr. Fred Couples. I'm going to go ahead and quickly hit Save and Matter. I'm going to just say Fred versus Jill. And now, let's just enter a docket as of this particular day, 12th of May. I'm just going to go ahead and say 12th of May. And if you notice, the docket is by default set up to be a flat rate. So when it's a flat rate, you do not have to enter the actual billable hour. You just enter what the amount is, and depending on your jurisdiction, uLaw would automatically calculate the appropriate HST or jurisdictional taxes. And in the title, you can basically say bringing, or you can basically say the work done, right, and generate that invoice. Okay, and you're basically going to hit save, assuming that there is no trust account transactions. And the last step, so that uLaw registers that there's an accounts receivable involved, is to generate the invoice. And to do that, you have right under document generation or right under here the ability to generate an invoice. And as I mentioned, we do have a pre-bill. And if you do this preview, this is one of the settings that we were talking about. This little watermark called preview is an option that you have to do yes or no. Okay? All right, let me just go ahead and generate that invoice, and I'm going to hit complete. Very important that you change this date to whatever was the last date of your AR balance. Like basically, when did that start? Right? When did you generate it in your previous system? You can use different themes. I'm just going to use the uLaw theme, and I'm going to change the date to the 12th, and I'm going to hit the invoice button. And I'll hit download. Once I've done that, if I go into my balances, and if I do my general, you're going to notice that Mr. Fred Couples, as of 12th of May, owes us that $339. So your AR balance of $339 is also established as a key building block of your migration into uLaw. So these are all the important building blocks: your trust balance and the accumulated, how you accumulated the trust balance across multiple matters and clients, your general balance depending on the number of general accounts that your firm has. If you don't have a credit card, that's okay. If you don't have a HST account, that's okay too. But if you have all of those, then it's important that you bring all that information into uLaw. Then finally, we want to understand if you have any outstanding accounts receivable balances. And you reproduce that into uLaw by creating the client, creating the matter, putting the work that you put in as of the date of the invoice, generating the invoice, backdated. That's a cool feature of the product, is you can backdate to whatever date in the past to reflect it. Okay? Those are the 5 simple steps that we believe, as you first get started into using the product, form the building blocks of that migration process. Now, after which, every other step in this diagram, if you will, is just a matter of the day-to-day tasks: creating the client, docketing the effort, generating the invoice. And last but not the least, once you continue to do all of that information, is, again, uLaw is also a business accounting software, so you can import bank statements as well. So if you're banking with RBC or TD or any of those different institutions, as you can see we have right from BMO to President's Choice, you can import all of your general accounts into uLaw as well. So you can do that for your general account, for your business credit card, even your HST account. And the reason we do that, because we're also a business accounting software, you can also bring in all of your expenses that you've had. So let's say you've had some office expenses. You can either manually enter them one at a time, or you can simply import your bank statement and we would automatically capture those expenses. So if earlier on you did have your, let's say you purchased a laptop, you can put that in. Put the total amount if you like. We automatically capture the pre-tax amount, or you can put the pre-tax amount and then based on the jurisdiction, you can change the tax code if you purchased this elsewhere, or if you purchased at a place where there's no taxes, you can do that. Or if you just press locally within Ontario, you can leave it at the 13%. You can create vendors, tell us how you paid for it. Now this is another important component to keep in mind. When you first get started with your business, right, we often find that our legal professional friends don't necessarily spend the money for all of these office expenses out of their general account, out of their business account. Keep in mind, uLaw as a product is fundamentally geared towards the utilization of your firm or of your corporate business accounts, okay? But many times, like how life has it, you may have paid for this out of your own pocket. You may have paid out of this your personal debit card. You may have used your personal credit card, right? Now in uLaw, we make that simple by logging that as a owner's pocket transaction. And I'll tell you why we do that. Initially, when we do that as a owner's pocket transaction and hit, let's say you do make that purchase out of your own money. Now, if you choose owner's pocket, of course, you're going to see that one transaction, and it's negative. At the end of the month, end of the quarter, or even end of every 6 months, the goal is to make this zero, because then you don't want these balances to be negative. You want to be able to pay yourself for all that money that you've put in. So the firm essentially owes you, the individual, this $1,130. Okay, so whether, depending on how you set up your payment structure, whether you do capital draw or you've set up yourself as a salaried employee, that's something that we hope that you will figure out either yourself or using an accountant. You can ensure that this owner's pocket transaction would give you that clarity as to how much the firm owes you as an individual. Okay? So when you do that draw, you can include that $1,130 that the firm owes you, the individual Thomas. So very important to keep in mind that we do give you the flexibility to also bring in all of your office expenses. And when we talk about expenses, of course, another important aspect of setting up uLaw is also setting up those expense accounts. By default, we start you off with a basic standard list from stationary to disallowed expenses, but then you can create your own list that's more meaningful to you. And you can say, add new account into my expense accounts under my office expenses category, and essentially say Law Society fees. Okay, so the next time you do add a office expense, you would see that under the list. So this is another important aspect as you get started using the product, is setting up these important expense accounts. And you can basically say Law Society, whatever the amount may be. And if you're actually paying this out of your own general account or your credit card, maybe you wrote them a check. You can even print that check if you like. You enter that information. Okay? Now, as you continue down the path of entering information, you can be rest assured that that information either becomes part of a report, given in uLaw, or becomes a part of another aspect of a business life cycle that you need to go through. What that really means is if I have to do my reconciliation at the end of the month, and I do my compliance, and let's assume I do my trust reconciliation, here are those two trust deposits that we had. Of course, if you had other retainers that you had coming in, you would see that as well. But let's look at our general reconciliation. You do see the Law Society expenses under your general account. Now, if I go into my cash account and choose my owner's pocket, you're also going to see the $1,130 that you paid out of your own pocket. So we do allow you the capability to also reconcile your general account, not only that, your credit card, but also your personal cash account or the owner's pocket account that you utilized. Okay? And the reconciliation is a simple process where you basically tell us if this transaction exists in real life in your bank account. And if it does, tell us what the appropriate balance in your bank account is, right? Either do a preview of the reconciliation. Again, just like your invoice preview, we all have this option for you to preview your reconciliation statement. Okay? This is something you can do at the end of every month. In fact, as part of our service at uLaw, we do follow up with all of our clients to ensure that they're comfortable doing the reconciliation. Many times we're happy to provide sessions where we can help you with that first month's reconciliation, because that's a very, very important last step, if you will, of this entire journey, starting with changing your password to reconciling your accounts. Okay? So again, once again, I want to make sure that this was a informational session that gave you the information about how you want to get started and plan for the kind of information that you need before you migrate data over into uLaw. Keep in mind we do have our support staff who can help you through this process and the journey and ensure that you're compliant across this whole path. So once again, thank you so much for joining me in today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded and most certainly will be available in our YouTube channel as early as next week. And we, of course, encourage emails, feedback on how we can make these sessions better for you, any newer topics that you would like for us to cover. And, of course, we have our CPD session coming up the following week around disbursements, and we look forward to seeing you at that webinar. Thank you once again, and hope you have a fantastic long weekend. Take care.